Hello everyone, my name is Kate Merton. I have the privilege of being the head of JLABS here in New York and in Boston and other interests on the East Coast.
Good morning, I'm Suzanne Lee, another Brit. I'm the founder of an annual summit here in New York called Biofabricate, and I'm also the chief creative officer of a biotech startup here in New York called Modern Meadow.
Great, Dave Whelan, not a Brit, but Angelino. So I'm dressed like an Angelino, so you guys can tell me apart from the New Yorkers. Work at the intersection of technology, health and wellness, and been working here in New York over the years with Nancy Kelley and a bunch of other people who've spoken today on building New York Genome Center and some other awesome things to come.
Hello, I'm Dan Grushkin. I'm a former journalist. I'm now the executive director of Genspace, which is the world's first community biology lab, and I'm also the the founder of the Biodesign Challenge, which is a program that brings together art and design students with biologists to imagine the future of biotechnology.
I am from New York. I'm a real estate professional. I practice here almost 40 years, and I'm going to start with just a few comments that put this in the lens of a real estate professional. It's interesting, we've had a couple conferences at Hines, the firm I work for, big global firm, big presence in New York, and we would define the moment that we're in as a period of accelerating change, driven largely by technology and demographic change. The demographic change associated with baby boomers aging and millennials entering the workforce. And so as we go through the slides, at least for the real estate professionals in the room today, here are the things I've asked myself. Over the last 40 years or so, Hines has been involved incidentally in any number of projects that touch the kind of subjects that we're covering today. We've done a lab for the FDA, did a headquarters building for Bristol Myers Squibb in Princeton. We're doing a senior housing project now. We've done a data center for Morgan Stanley in Somerset. All of these things have been incidental. They have not been a primary part of what we have done. And I think everyone is here today asking themselves, I think at a fundamental level, you know, are we really in the century of biology? Is there a unified theory of biology as there was for physics in the last century? What does it mean to real estate professionals here in New York? Is this going to simply be, you know, incidental to the local economy? Or is it going to ultimately take a place of primacy as it has in Boston? In New York, you know, employment in this sector is in the range of 2 million or so people. In Boston, I've read it's 12 to 15 million. And are we at the point of a change? How do we make that change? New buildings or reuse buildings? Will the industry cluster or want to be connected to commercial space? Whole lots of questions. We're going to try to make this a panel discussion as opposed to, you know, a bunch of formal presentations. So if we can try to get through the formal presentations in 5 or 7 minutes, that would be terrific. There aren't that many slides.
So I thought it would be useful, just a little bit of context. I am not a scientist. I'm a fashion designer by training. However, I've spent the last 15 years of my life, probably more of that time with scientists than I have with designers. I moved to New York to join a biotech company, which in itself is probably a first of its kind. So for me, that is indicative that the two worlds of design and biology are coming together in new ways, not for the more traditional disciplines like medicine, pharma, you know, biomedical, but rather consumer biotech. So I just thought it would be useful to share a definition of biofabrication as I see it. So through the eyes of a designer, we talk about biofabricating, making things with biology, using living cells, and really thinking about how we design with biology to bring products in every field. So I started off thinking about materials for fashion, you know, what I'm wearing, my shoes, my bag, growing that using living cells. But we've extended far beyond that. So thinking about furniture, your car, architecture, anywhere that we are making materials, making products from raw materials, how can we rethink those materials through the lens of biology for sustainability, but also because it gives us opportunities to design things more efficiently. So let's just look at some of those. Here is what I see as the factories of the future. So thinking about different types of living cell, I started by growing my own clothes using bacteria, which is not the usual way that you sort of come together with a field. But that exposed me to all of these other factories, if you like. And so at Modern Meadow, we're actually growing leather materials, biofabricated leather materials using a yeast organism. So that is the sort of world view as I see it. And really what I think the opportunity is, as you can see here, these are all products manufactured by the intersection of design, biology, and technology that are the kinds of things that we might interact with on a daily basis. So you can see here a pair of shoes that were created by the footwear brand Adidas using an engineered bacteria that produces a spider silk protein fiber that can be biodegraded. You can see bricks here that are being grown in greenhouses in North Carolina. And on the far right, leather materials from yeast. So when we talk about what New York City has to offer in terms of the future of biotech, this is the kind of area that I'm really excited to be a part of. And Biofabricate is an annual summit that brings these worlds together, because I felt personally there was a huge gap for the convening of scientists, designers, artists, engineers, consumer brands, investors, and media to understand what the future can look like. And by collaborating more closely and educating, we can rethink what our academic institutions need to provide in terms of curriculum. We can think about what is the composition of your people in a biotech company. We're very unique to have a designer on the exec team at Modern Meadow, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be part of that vision. What does it mean when we go out into the world and we're educating brands who could be in automotive and thinking 5 years down the line or beyond about what their world looks like? And New York is uniquely placed to really do that. I think that's just the 3 slides that I have.
Here we go. So Genspace, it's a place, it's a BSL-1 lab in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, where anyone can come in. Within 3 hours, they can do their first genetic engineering experiment in one of our classes. They can stay indefinitely and work on their own projects or start their own companies. Genspace works on a membership model, so you pay your dues and you can use the lab as you see fit under our guidance. On a given day in Genspace, you will see PhD scientists working alongside of artists, designers, hobbyists, students. We are the first, Brooklyn bred, we are the first community biology lab. Other people call it the DIY biology labs. Other people call it biohacker spaces. There are 150 plus other spaces now around the world based on our model. There we go. This summer, and actually this past semester, high schoolers from schools that really didn't have lab facilities at all have come to our space, have learned basic research techniques, and are now this summer going to work on an iGEM level synthetic biology project where they'll have designed their own project and they'll actually have executed it as well. I think what we're creating here is an ecosystem for New York City where really anyone can come in and innovate. We're building a bridge, I think, for intrepid people in this community to enter into the biotech field. In addition, I'll give you an example. So Will Canine in the back over there, Will came in as a designer. He came in as an entrepreneur. He met another engineer at Genspace. In 2014, they were on our iGEM team. They built the inexpensive liquid handling robot. That collaboration ended up turning into a company. They now have 50 plus employees in Brooklyn and Shenzhen. and they are growing and selling robots literally all around the world. And that's just one of half a dozen companies that have started in our space. I think what we're seeing is a moment where creativity in biotech comes from collaborations between multiple different groups. So I'll give you another example. In 2015, this is the Biodesign Challenge. This is a program that we started to bring together artists, designers, and biologists to envision the future of biotechnology. I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Nancy and Suzanne for making this happen, and I actually owe a lot to the real estate community here in New York City, JBB, Newmark, Millrose, Hunter Roberts for supporting the first edition of the Biodesign Challenge. And what we do is we take those students after their collaborations throughout spring semester, and we bring them to New York City to present their projects on stage at the Museum of Modern Art. So next week, if you're in town and you want to come, we'll be on it. We'll be on stage. It'll be fantastic. So just reach out to me after this panel. Interestingly enough, these student projects that literally we started in 9 schools and now we're in 9 countries, these student projects have gone into museums, galleries. They've also gone and turned into companies. And so I'll give you 2 examples. Our winners from the first year of the Biodesign Challenge was a team from FIT, Fashion Institute of Technology. They created a yarn that was biodegradable, made from algae. They raised $135,000 in their first sort of getting off the ground, and now they're in a seed round. They're actually hiring. And then a second company has emerged from the Royal College of Art team. They basically made a pollination system where you literally can drive the pollinators, these are insects, around your orchard, almost like a remote-controlled car, to pollinate your orchard. They've already raised $70,000. They are in their seed round of funding and also hiring. So I'd like you to think, as you think about New York City's landscape, biotech landscape, think about where innovation comes from. I think you'd be intrigued, and it would behoove you to think about these other ways in which innovation is being driven in New York City. Thank you.
Perfect, thanks. So again, Dave Whelan, and I'm just going to back up a second and explain kind of the LA connection, because hearing sort of the stories this morning and thinking about kind of New York following in the footsteps or living in the shadow or inspired by Boston and Cambridge, to me very much like Los Angeles kind of on the West Coast, in between San Diego and the Bay Area, and sort of figuring out a way to build hubs and create an ecosystem and kind of build a network that can pull innovation out of the universities in LA. And so I think that's kind of what's connected me to New York so much over the past few years, and why I'm trying to build these bridges. And Nancy and I have worked together over many years, starting with New York Genome Center, and she and I have been working quite a bit over the past few years on a project called GP Wright, as well as an organization that we're trying to build here in New York called the Center of Excellence for Engineering Biology. And I'm not going to go too much into engineering biology. Suzanne kind of gave a great intro, but basically thinking about the work that we did with New York Genome Center here in New York and kind of the genome sequencing world, if you think about what that has created from an industry standpoint, billions and billions of dollars around genomic sequencing, and that's all about reading DNA. And ultimately, what we're trying to do here is write DNA, create new products, create new life, like materials, like fabrics, but also things that can innovate around energy, around bioremediation, as Nancy mentioned earlier, the healthcare world for sure, chemicals, agriculture. Literally, I think engineering biology has the potential to impact every corner of the world, every facet of what we do, save money, save lives, and help to improve the economy and really sustainability for the whole planet. So it's a hugely exciting area, and I think New York is perfect to make that happen. And so a few years ago, Nancy, along with Jeff Boeke at NYU, George Church in Boston, Cambridge, and then Andrew Hessel, who's sort of a global citizen. I think he sort of moves around the world all the time. But the four of them came together with some great funders to create this thing called GP Write, which again is sort of the spiritual successor to the Human Genome Project, about writing a whole human genome, as well as other genomes. Launched 3 years ago. Now 200 plus scientists, 100 plus organizations, 15 countries and counting. So really this is a global effort that is being centered here in New York, and very, very exciting. There's some great companies who are supporting it. And I think there's huge potential for this, but what it really represents is the starting point for a new organization in New York, something that we think can have the same kind of impact, the same kind of physical presence, the same kind of connectivity that New York Genome Center does. And we kind of look at this idea, this Center of Excellence for Engineering Biology, as being something of a sister organization that would bring together a full-scale genome foundry, kind of that scalability that Nancy showed earlier, to design, build, test, create, all sorts of materials, all sorts of substances, all sorts of life, and then IT to support it. So we had John Saby up here earlier, and he worked with us at New York Genome Center to build out a data center there, something that would be very similar, massive data potential. And this really has the opportunity to kind of bring New York back to its old roots as well as new roots. So I'm just going to jump to the next slide here. Think about the massive history that New York has around manufacturing, around industry. We used to build things here, and there's still a lot of building going on. But when you take kind of that industrial heritage, combine it with the power of genomics, the power of engineering biology, the power of bioinformatics, and all of the technology here in New York, we have this chance to really create something massive for New York City, for the state, and for the world. And so really excited to figure out how that fits with everyone else here.
So,
It's lunch.
I am not lunch. I am not lunch, and unfortunately I do not have slides. I obviously missed the memo on that one. So what I'm going to do is take up the next 5 minutes and provide you a description of what JLABS is, the model. I'm going to be telling you about the JLABS that we're about to open in New York City next week, and then hopefully take a couple of minutes just to talk about our health tech program, which is being headlined here in New York. I hope that fits. So, for those who are not aware, JLABS is actually the incubator arm of Johnson & Johnson Innovation. Johnson & Johnson Innovation also includes a venture capital fund, innovation centers where our BD groups sit. The purpose of JLABS is to support entrepreneurs and also potentially bring in new innovation that's going to serve the needs of the larger J&J enterprise, where we function within farm, device, and consumer. So the incubator system, as it is, has been functioning for almost 6 years. We started in San Diego. It was a great pilot experiment. We had some excess lab space, and we wanted to see how a model would work where we put out this lab space for entrepreneurs that needed it. They needed to get up and running, but they didn't want to expend a lot of capital. And we had that extra lab space in La Jolla. So we started this, and it went very well. So after that, we expanded from San Diego. We went up to Boston. We went up to San Francisco. We went out to Toronto. We crossed the border. We also went down to Houston. We're also in Belgium, and I'm very happy to say that our 9th site is going to be opening in Soho, actually on the 3rd floor of the Genome Center next week on Thursday. We're going to be joined by our CEO and the Governor of New York, who was kind enough to give us $17 million of his public-private partnership to get it up and running. Once we've got New York up and running, we'll also be heading out to Asia, and we'll be opening a site in Shanghai. The JLABS model, in addition to providing lab space and general equipment that the entrepreneurs will need to get going, also provides educational programming, networking events, mentoring, which is provided by the over 130,000 employees of Johnson & Johnson. And we also have investor hubs where we invite our competition, the BD groups of the other large pharma, VC funds and angel funds to come in and have office hours with our entrepreneurs to help them fund and move along. With regards to the kind of entrepreneurs that we have coming into JLABS, they will be everything from the one-man band who's just, for example, the postdoc coming out of Rockefeller, and he's just got his first SBIR grant. He'll be coming in to join us, and then it goes into those with seed funding and those with Series A. We anticipate that these entrepreneurs will be using the joint equipment, bringing some of their own, and spending about 2 years with us. I'm happy to say that so far the JLABS portfolio includes about 370 companies, that's both alumni and current, and our success rate so far has been that 80% of those companies that originally started out in San Diego are still in business today, and they've actually grown in size by 5 times. So we know that the model is working, and we were very happy to see that we could get support from the local government here and move to New York. So on to JLABS in New York. As I mentioned, we're going to be the 3rd floor of the Genome Center. That's going to be 30,000 square feet that we've built out. It's going to be a 60-40 split between wet lab and dry space. Just like the other JLABS, that wet space is going to be broken up into private labs, where small companies can occupy a number of benches, or concept labs, where that one-man band can just literally rent one lab bench, bring their pipettes, bring their cells, and just get going. In addition to that, there's going to be the communal equipment, there's going to be tissue culture space, and all the other, rather boring piece of equipment that a scientist needs to get up and running. In addition to that will be the 40% desk space. That's also important because not only will we have companies that work in farm, device, and consumer, but we are looking forward to having a number of health tech companies come and join us. Obviously, Johnson & Johnson functions in those 3 large areas, and we are the largest healthcare company, but moving forward, we'd like to be the largest digital healthcare company. And it's important for us to also kind of nurture the entrepreneurs that are working in the health tech space. We've seen organically that a number of technologists want to join JLABS globally because they see us as one of the healthcare leaders, and they think that we can teach them a lot. And I think that J&J has been humble enough to know that maybe we don't know everything there is to know about health tech, and perhaps using our incubator is going to be a great way for us to learn from the technologists, and then the technologists to learn from us about healthcare. So that is why we started the Health Tech at JLABS program, which was just opened up at South by Southwest 3 months ago. And in addition to heading up JLABS here in New York and in Boston, I have the pleasure of running that strategy globally. So not only what goes on here in New York, but at all of the other sites. And what we are hoping to do, which is a little bit different for JLABS, is to invite other partners to come and work with us. We understand that healthcare is moving at such a pace that soon you won't just be getting your healthcare delivered to you in a doctor's office. It's going to be happening to you in your autonomous vehicle. It's going to be happening to you in your home. So we want to partner with other companies such as Verizon and Philips and Verily to understand what they think the future of healthcare is and bring that to us in JLABS. And particularly, we're going to be heading it up at our New York site. So I think that was all I wanted to cover, and I want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to speak this morning.
So I wanted to start really by asking all the panelists to answer really 2 questions. It's obvious to me why we're doing a senior housing project, because we've got a lot of aging and very wealthy people in New York. It's obvious to me why Google and Facebook are in New York as well as the West Coast, because they can find their workforce here. Is New York offer anything specific that gives it competitive advantage to some of the other locations for engineering biology? And within New York, what will drive location choices? Is it the presence of good living communities, relationship to academic institutions, hospitals? If each of you could take a crack at answering that kind of 2-part question. Why New York? Is it really singular?
Why New York? Okay, so apart from being able to get some capital to help us build out the lab, the primary reason that we're here is that if you look at the centers of innovation globally, New York is right at the top. It's in the top 5. And if you want to be an innovator in healthcare, the next thing you have to think about is where's the funding coming from. And New York is actually number 2 for NIH funding across the country. So it's beating out either Boston or Silicon Valley. So we saw that it's number 2 on funding. There's going to be an increase in the amount of VC funding that's coming to New York. It's actually risen, I think, from number 10 to number 2 in the last 5 years. And we also saw that apart from the government, that the academic centers, and there's 9 great academic centers here in New York that are world class, that if you put all that together, I think with the varying support, it made New York kind of a very easy choice for JLABS to want to come and start here. With regards to the location within Manhattan, we were lucky enough to land in the Genome Center. So if you put all those subway maps together and you think about where they all converge, that's pretty much where the Genome Center is, because it's incredibly important for these startups and these entrepreneurs to have great workforces to come and meet them. We know that 7% of postdocs actually come out of New York, so they're not lacking in the workforce. It's incredibly skilled here, but it's very tough sometimes to get to the right place, so that's why we strategically picked the area of Manhattan that we're in. I think the only other comment I'd like to make, seeing as there's real estate developers here, is that what's going to be key is having that step-out space, that once you get out of an incubator, where are those people are going to go? And we need to keep them here in New York, and we need to think strategically about where that's going to be.
Terrific. Next panelist.
I would say talent pool. So, New York City has incredible academic institutions, whether you're talking about the top design schools or for scientists and life science study. The coming together of those two in one place is a really unique opportunity. And I don't think Boston has that same mix. So that is definitely, for me, what distinguishes New York from the Boston area, is that it just doesn't have the design and then the industry piece of it. So as you think about consumer industries, those are very much headquartered in New York. So whether it's on the academic side or as we think about the brands that are going to be using those technologies or materials, that's very a New York focus. And to that end, I think what we very much represent is that sort of community, and it is very sort of tight-knit here in New York. And to give you an example, I recently hired someone on my team at Modern Meadow who studied fashion at Parsons, but did a residency at Genspace, learned those sort of biotech skills, and now has a job at Modern Meadow. And that is very much a product of New York and the kinds of facilities that are available here, and certainly what I think we're all really keen to grow.
Yeah, I'll kind of echo what Kate and Suzanne said in terms of the population and sort of the diversity. And when you think about diversity, both from an industry standpoint, literally every industry in the world is represented here in New York. From a functional standpoint, in terms of whether it's people in the creative space or technology or life sciences, and then thinking in particular around the healthcare side of things, diversity of population from a research standpoint. So, there are a few places in the world where a researcher can draw on the population right around them from a standpoint of doing their work. And, every ethnicity and age and socioeconomic is represented here in New York. And so, everyone is here. So that's kind of the first question. The second one, like Kate, I guess I'm biased since I worked on New York Genome Center and love that area. So that kind of nexus of space. But I think what's also important, and I'm sure Daniel will kind of echo this in terms of what he's done, but making sure there are mini hubs or kind of meetups or places for people to plug into kind of throughout the city, throughout the greater area, because it's one thing to have a massive hub in one place, but I think you've also got to connect to people where they are, meet them where they are, go out into the community, and this is more than just Manhattan. It's the 5 boroughs and beyond. Kind of get to where people are and give them resources.
Thanks. I think what makes New York unique here is the possibility for collaboration with people from a diversity of backgrounds, professional and otherwise. When we opened Genspace now 9 years ago, one of the first groups that showed up at our door were designers. And we didn't know what to do with them. And they said, hey, we want to use biotechnology as our new palette. What can we do? And that sort of blossomed into all kinds of interesting collaborations. So I think the fact that there's this diversity of people, that we can be a hub for biotech and draw those people who had never even thought of biotech before into biotech, and then have them use their expansive imaginations to imagine where it could go, is really important. And I think that makes New York unique to any of the other hubs, Silicon Valley, unique to Boston. It's all here. The other thing I think that's really important is there needs to be places for people to be able to dip their toe into this field. For a normal scientist, you usually are going to go through your 4 years of undergrad. You're going to go through your 5 to 7 years of graduate school. You're going to end up as a postdoc, and that's all before you really get to do your own exploration. You're working for someone else that entire time. So there needs to be places where people can really onboard right off the bat and explore the potential. And I think that ultimately that ends up having to be places that are either subsidized or extremely inexpensive to get those people through the door. So that's why we're in Sunset Park, but I think that there's opportunity really across the city for this.
And do you think that the sector has reached the point of maturity? One of the major academic institutions or private institutions, J&J, Pfizer, could sponsor a building as a lead user with shared space that incubates others. If you think about New York in the last 30 years, all the major industries that have really grown here, whether it's foreign banks or technology companies, ultimately claim, the presence of a building. Are we at that point? I'm looking at J&J.
Yeah,
I do have some old instincts about leasing.
So we are obviously headquartered across the water in New Brunswick, New Jersey. We are based there, but we don't actually have an incubator there, which I think says a lot, and the fact that we are coming here. So we have been very happy to put our name up on the 3rd floor of the Genome Center, and I wouldn't count out the fact that perhaps there is interest also to kind of double down here and have a larger presence. I can't actually speak for Pfizer. I'll let someone else cover that one.
I can reinforce the location choice.
Can I just add to that? I think that creating these spaces is important in terms of the exploration and experimenting with what the future biotech workforce will look like. I don't think it's going to look like the scientists of yesteryear. I think it's going to be people who are diverse in their interests, diverse in their skill sets, and I think that's what gives New York its edge here. So if companies like Pfizer, like J&J, can bring these groups of people who would ordinarily be outsiders into the inside, we're going to discover what those new careers are going to look like.
So, yeah, I can go back and I think I'll build upon what you said. So when I came out and finished my PhD, the option was going to do an academic or go to like New Jersey or somewhere else to do research, right? And I obviously picked one of those. But now, would I still make that same choice? No, I probably want to go work in somewhere cool like WeWorks and a big metropolitan city. And I think that is one of the reasons that J&J came here, because they know this is where the talent is as well. Maybe there's still talent in New Jersey, but I think you're going to get a different crop and people who think in different ways in the large metropolitan cities, and that's why we've gone there.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is the same thing I would hear with others, which is this next generation of scientists will make different choices that probably favor urbanization, favor connectivity, and bundle that with capital. It's interesting to me that I think life sciences doesn't yet really have a presence, in the minds of many people in the local economy or the real estate economy, and hopefully this conference is going to further the idea that it is a growing cluster in New York. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the audience? Got a question right here.
Hi, my name's Heidi Kubarubia. I'm the New York editor for Engineering News Record. So I kind of want to flip the script a little bit. We've been talking a lot about building structures for life sciences, but I'm wondering, especially with you all who are, doing the bleeding edge of life sciences, has life sciences at all affected the construction industry? Like, have there been some materials based on biological engineering? Have there been methods of construction, whether it's the techniques, that kind of thing? And then also, does New York, since it's one of the centers of construction in the world, has that also offered something to you all, perhaps whether even a collaboration?
Can I maybe take that one? So two answers. yes and yes, and much more so in the future. One example is that the first ever structure that was created using mushroom materials, bricks that were grown using fungi, was actually commissioned by MoMA for their PS1 venue several years back. I don't know if you remember what year it was, Dan, like 2011 or something? Oh, okay. But that was the first time an architect had collaborated with biologists, created construction materials. So that was in a museum context. But the bacterial bricks that I showed you on the screen is a company called Biomason, so literally bringing biology with bricks together. And the materials that they're growing are being used. I believe they have an installation from their very first generation of products in Silicon Valley at a big startup. I'm not quite sure which one it is, but it could be Google or somewhere. So people in technology are also looking to understand, and architects, if you go to the Bartlett School of Architecture in London, they have a sort of wet lab space where architects are working very much to understand biological systems and how that's going to literally change the face both of construction and the health of the environment around us.
Yeah, in addition to that, at the Biodesign Challenge, we're seeing that a number of architecture schools are joining the competition because they want to bring biotechnology into the classrooms of the next generation of architects. And so Pratt's architecture class, for example, participated in the Biodesign Challenge, and several others. So I think we're going to see increasing numbers of schools that are educating their students so that the future generation of architects are looking at these materials as something that's possible and something that's usable in the structures that they build. Come to the Biodesign Challenge, you'll meet them.
We're out of time. Thank you very much.